The Detroit Lions may have just quietly solved one of the biggest problems that haunted this franchise all of last season. And the wild part? The answer has been sitting on the roster the entire time. A new report just dropped, and the reaction from Lions fans everywhere has basically been the same. Oh yeah, I forgot about this guy. So today we are diving deep into that story, breaking down exactly why this could change the entire outlook of Detroit's defense heading into 2026. But before we get into it, if you're new to this channel, welcome to Detroit Scope. This is where we bring you the Lions stories nobody else is covering with the depth and the energy they deserve. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, we cannot get there without you. So if today's video keeps you locked in, do us a solid and hit that subscribe button before you go. It means the world to a channel like ours. Now let's talk defense. Let's set the scene. Last season, new free agent signing or a blockbuster trade acquisition. It is Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle Detroit drafted in the first round back in 2025, a player who, if we're being honest, did not exactly light the league on fire in year one. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't great. He was exactly into as a professional. And that is really the key to understanding this whole story. Defensive tackle might be the hardest position in football for a rookie to walk into and immediately dominate. Why? Because you're lining up across from grown men in the trenches every single Sunday. And unlike speed positions where age and athleticism can decline quickly, defensive tackles do not lose strength as they age. They might lose a step. They might lose some of that first step explosion, but the raw strength stays. That means rookies at this position are literally going head-to-head with some of the most physically mature, dialed-in players in the entire league, and that is an enormous ask for anyone in year one. That is exactly the developmental arc many are now comparing Williams to, and the name being thrown around constantly is Alim McNeill. Remember McNeill's rookie season? Flashes. Moments where you'd catch yourself saying, okay, that looked good, followed by long stretches where he blended into the background. And then boom. Year 2 and year 3 hit, and suddenly McNeill was one of the most disruptive interior defenders in the entire NFC. That is the exact trajectory people are now projecting for Tyleik Williams heading into his second season. Here's why the timing lines up so perfectly. Williams enters year 2 with a full offseason of NFL-caliber strength training, nutrition, and coaching under his belt, the kind of structured development a player simply cannot replicate in college. If a defensive tackle does not show a jump between year 1 and year 2, that is typically when concern starts creeping in. Is the guy taking it seriously? Is this a bust in the making? But all signs from this offseason point to Williams doing exactly the opposite, showing up faster, more confident, and more comfortable at the professional level than he was a year ago. And here is what makes this all click into place perfectly. The Lions' interior defensive line took real hits this offseason. Longtime veteran presence gone. A key run-stuffing piece gone. That leaves a massive void in the middle of Brian Flores's, excuse us, the Lions' current defensive scheme. Someone has to step up. And all signs point to that, someone being Tyleik Williams, lining up right next to a fully healthy Alim McNeill, who has been vocal about how disappointed he was in his own performance last season following a torn ACL that limited him. If both of these two take a real step forward together, Detroit suddenly has legitimate interior pressure again. And when you have interior pressure, you stop the run. And when you stop the run, good things start happening on defense almost automatically, including turnovers that sometimes show up seemingly out of nowhere. And that is not just a cute theory. It is Lions history. Remember the stretch a couple of seasons back when this defense was an absolute problem for opposing offenses? It wasn't some genius, exotic scheme that had everyone fooled. It was simple. Get up in your face. Stop the run. Force just enough turnovers that the ratio tips in your favor. You do not need to be historically great at forcing turnovers. You just need to be better at creating them than you are at giving them away. That is the blueprint. And if the defensive tackle position clicks the way people believe it can, that blueprint is back on the table for 2026. There's actually a jaw-dropping stat that backs up just how much interior pressure matters for this specific roster. Go back to the stretch when Aiden Hutchinson got hurt in the middle of a divisional matchup last season. Detroit was 4-1 at that point. After Hutchinson went down, most outside observers assumed the defense would collapse without its best player rushing the passer. Instead, the Lions went an outrageous 11 and won the rest of the way, finishing the season 15-2. How does a defense function at an elite level without its best edge rusher for a huge chunk of a year? Interior pressure. Players getting home up the middle change the entire math of opposing offenses, forcing quick, uncomfortable decisions that this secondary and linebacking core could capitalize on. If Tyleik Williams becomes the guy who can consistently provide that kind of push, this defense does not just get better. It gets scary. Now, no defense is perfect, and even with all this optimism building around the defensive tackle spot, there's still a couple of spots worth watching heading into training camp. The first is cornerback depth. Detroit could use one more proven corner capable of playing at a high level in a real pinch. That could come from a young player finally living up to his draft billing, or it could come from a depth piece simply outperforming expectations. The good news is that the corner room already has more talent than some fans realize. There's a name that has quietly been slept on by the fan base that insiders believe could be a real difference maker if given the opportunity. The second spot to watch is that third linebacker role. It is not technically a starting job in the traditional sense since Detroit figures to lean heavily into nickel packages, but depth at that spot matters, especially over the course of a grueling 16-plus game season. The logic here is simple. You cannot play 3 linebackers and 3 cornerbacks on the field at the same time. It is one or the other, situationally, and Detroit needs at least one more trustworthy body in each of those rooms heading into the fall. Outside of those 2 spots, though, there is genuine confidence around this building that the starting level of this defense is as talented and deep as it has been in years. Now let's talk about one of the most predictable and yet most dramatic parts of every single NFL offseason: the surprise cut. Every year, without fail, a name comes off a roster that makes fans do a double take. This year is not going to be any different, and the guessing game has already started. One report floated the idea that a recently acquired offensive lineman could be a surprise cut candidate. But digging deeper into the numbers, that take does not hold up especially well. A player Detroit specifically traded for is unlikely to be the odd man out, especially when he provides valuable positional versatility as a primary backup at a premium spot. Instead, the names that tend to make fans gasp are the ones tied to breakout preseason performances. Think about it. Every single summer, there's a receiver who catches everything thrown his way through training camp and preseason games, and the fan base falls head over heels. Highlight catches, diving grabs. Everybody online proclaiming this is the next great value pickup. And then cut down day arrives, and that same player is let go without a second thought. Or a running back busts off a long touchdown run late in a playoff game. Gets the whole fan base buzzing about his future role, and within a few months, he's off the roster entirely. That is how surprise cuts actually work in the NFL. It is rarely about talent alone. It's about numbers, scheme fit, and depth at other positions across the roster. There are a handful of names on this roster that would qualify as a legitimate shock if they were let go. Players who have started games, who have shown real flashes, and who fans have grown attached to. A backup tight end who has been a reliable safety net. A developmental offensive tackle who is supposed to be part of the long-term plan. A rotational defensive lineman who has quietly logged real snaps. Any one of those names hitting the cut list would send a jolt through the fan base. But the reality is, with a roster this deep and this talented, somebody has to go, and it likely will not be who most fans expect. As all of this shakes out, there's a genuine sense heading into training camp that this preseason is going to matter more than it has in recent memory. Here's why. Detroit is reportedly not running any joint practices with other teams this summer. That means if the coaching staff wants to evaluate their starters in live, competitive snaps before the regular season begins, those preseason games are the only opportunity to do it. Expect key offensive starters to see more run than usual, even if it's only a handful of drives spread across the preseason slate. This matters because Detroit's offense has had a well-documented habit of starting painfully slow over the last several years, even under strong coaching. Getting some real, live reps into key playmakers before week 1 could be exactly the adjustment this team needs to finally come out of the gate with some early season fire. Of course, preseason football comes with its usual growing pains. The excitement builds. You tune in ready to evaluate every single snap, and within minutes you're reminded why preseason football looks the way it looks. Backup quarterbacks who don't have time to set their feet. Offensive linemen jumping offside. Running backs and quarterbacks miscommunicating on basic play action. It is often difficult, clunky football to watch from a pure entertainment standpoint. But if you're a true fan who cares about roster depth, and especially if you're a fan of a team that has dealt with more than its fair share of injuries in recent seasons, preseason football becomes essential viewing. You need to know what's behind the starters. You need to know who steps up when the inevitable injuries hit. There are specific names worth circling on defense this preseason. Watch the young cornerbacks getting extended run in the secondary, looking for that one signature play that makes the fan base sit up and take notice. Watch to see whether a certain developmental pass rusher can turn his athletic upside into real, live sacks against starting caliber tackles. And of course, everyone will be watching to see whether the team's top wide receiver, still working his way back from injury, looks like his dominant self again or continues to look a step behind. These are the storylines that will define not just the preseason, but potentially the trajectory of Detroit's entire 2026 campaign. So here's the big picture heading into training camp. The Lions may have quietly found the answer to last year's biggest defensive problem, sitting right there on the roster the whole time in the form of a young defensive tackle who simply needed a full offseason to develop. Pair that with a healthy, motivated Alim McNeill, address the minor depth questions at cornerback and linebacker, and this defense has a real chance to look like the version of itself that carried Detroit to a 15-win season. Add in the drama of roster cutdowns and a preseason slate that actually matters this year, and Lions fans have every reason to be locked in for the next several weeks. So here's what we want to know from you. Do you believe Tyleik Williams is about to have his Alim McNeill-style breakout season? Who do you think is the real surprise cut candidate on this roster this summer? And which position group are you most excited to watch during the preseason? Drop your answers in the comments below. We read every single one. If this video kept you locked in, do us a huge favor here at Detroit Scope. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakdown. We are working hard to hit 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching right now can help make that happen. Thanks for riding with us, Lions Nation. We'll see you in the next one.